Welcome to this week's video tutorial for virtualracingschool.com with the global Mazda MX-5 Cup car. This week takes us back to Summit Point, where this time we'll be tackling the short and tricky Jefferson circuit. As usual, I've driven a lap on the baseline setup in default afternoon weather for the data pack on the VRS app. Before I go into the analysis, I'll play the lap through first in full. Okay, so that was a 54.113. Okay, so as usual we're going to start off on the data packs page on the VRS website, and we're going to choose the global MX-5 Cup series. We're going to select week 5 from the list, and we're going to choose learn track. But before we do that, loads up the session details where you can find lap files, the replay to download, and the setup. Of course, it's just the iRacing baseline setup. So yeah, we're going to click on learn track, loads up the analyzer, starts playing the lap through. I'm just going to pause it and mute it. And just to summarize what we're seeing here for those of you who might not be familiar, we've got a steering angle trace across the duration of the lap, as well as a speed trace, brake and throttle input traces as well, and finally some live driving inputs on the bottom left here. So VRS divides the lap up into individual sectors which are automatically generated. We're going to click on sector 1, which is the run from the start finish line to the braking zone for turn 1, and I'll just play this through. So obviously just bringing the car gradually over to the left hand side of the circuit in anticipation for braking for turn 1. Don't worry about this lift here, that's just me upshifting into 4th gear. Now there's not really any reference to speak of really, unfortunately, for turn 1, so you're just going to have to sort of feel it, and as you do laps you'll get more consistent and you'll kind of learn to tell yourself whether or not you're braking too early or too late, and go from there really. It is a 2nd gear corner, so it's quite a slow corner, so you do need to brake with plenty of time. A reference that you could potentially use is the start of this wall on the left, but as we take it through to sector 2 you'll see that the braking point is significantly before that point. So I'll just show you chase view as well. Just go back to the braking point there. So yeah, significantly before the wall starts there on the left. In terms of car positioning, obviously you want the car fully over to the left hand side of the circuit. There's some extra sort of tarmac curbing on the left which you can take advantage of, and you want to kind of brake about 50%. I'll just slow it down and take it through to cockpit view. So yeah, I'm braking about 50% there. No need to brake any harder than that in this car. Even with the ABS, it's just not necessary, and you have a lot more control with your braking if you brake nice and gently. You can see obviously here I'm blipping the throttle as I downshift, which is my braking isn't quite constant, and obviously I have 2 blips down into 2nd gear, and I'm also turning in fairly soon, so pretty much after I've downshifted into 3rd gear I'm starting to turn in, and it's a very long corner, this first corner, so you need to aim for a fairly early apex, but then to try and hold a nice tight line through the corner. So to achieve this, obviously as I'm turning in, I'm bleeding off the brakes gradually, but then I don't I briefly touch the throttle there, but I don't get back onto the throttle for quite some time. And in fact, just to keep the car nice and tight through the corner itself, I'm just teasing the brakes all the way around, and what that does is just keeps me nice and tight to this curb on the inside. You want to get really close to that, but ideally not to make contact with it. So when I do eventually pick up the throttle, the car's quite underpowered, so I pick up the throttle quite suddenly, which really helps the car to be straight on the limit of traction and helps the car to rotate. So I've got a nice tight good exit, and I do reach full throttle by the time I sort of reach the middle of the circuit on the exit there. Obviously there's an upshift into third here before the left-hander, where I'm aiming for this curb on the inside, and I do actually get fully on top of it there. So I'm not quite as far along as the grass, but one thing I want to bring your attention to is as I'm on the curb, I'm just feathering out of the throttle. So we can just see that it just keeps the car settled. You will find if you try and go flat out through that corner on that curb, the car will probably oversteer quite violently. And these curbs are really quite nasty at this circuit, so just be aware of that. Bring the car towards the middle of the circuit before then pretty much turning in immediately again for the next right-hander, where I just briefly dab the brakes. Now I'm left foot braking now because I don't need to downshift, so that's why there's a bit of overlap between my brake and throttle. So I'm just trying to stabilize the car with the throttle. As I approach this curb on the right, which I think I just about get, yes, I'm just about on this curb. You probably can use a bit more, just be really cautious with it because it can really upset the balance of the car. So in anticipation of that, you can see I'm quite I'm off the throttle before the curb, and then I'm quite careful with the throttle over the curb, and especially as I'm exiting this corner as well. Again, very, very cautious with the throttle. And notice how I'm also bringing the car over to the right on the exit to set up for the long left-hander that's following. So very, very short braking zone into here, braking roughly in the middle of the circuit. Down one gear into second. Now you want a really tight line all the way through here, so I'm quite tight on the entry, and I'm going to get very close to this curb on the left. I do actually just kind of miss the ideal line there, so a little bit wide. Let me just go back to the point where I pick up the throttle. So I pick up the throttle quite suddenly, and the reason that I'm doing that is I'm aware that I'm running wide and I'm trying to get the car to rotate back, so I kind of stab at the throttle, which works a little bit, but then I immediately have to back off, to just wait, be patient, and then finally it reaches a point where I can commit to the throttle. So notice how the ideal line is to not run any wider than the middle of the circuit at this point. So you've got these painted white lines in the middle of the circuit for reference, and you want to be up into third gear before then bringing the car back over towards this inside curb, which obviously this is not really even a proper corner at this point. You're just trying to minimize the distance that you're covering. So up into fourth gear, down the hill. Now pretty much as the circuit starts to level out down the hill, that's where you're going to start braking into the next left-hander. So on the brakes now, quite gently, because we're going to turn in pretty shortly after braking. And again, notice how my car is positioned all the way to the right hand side, taking full advantage of all of the track available to me. Down a gear into third, teasing off the brakes, bleeding off the brakes I should say, but holding those brakes all the way into the apex, even though I am right foot braking. So I'm making sure that I'm not letting go of those brakes, and that just helps the car rotate, keeps the front end loaded up, and keeps me nice and tight into the apex. And then because it's a fast corner, it's a fairly slow car, you can pick up the throttle very quickly, assuming that you have timed it right, which I appear to have done so on this lap, because I'm running towards the edge of the circuit on the exit, but there is a tiny bit of grip to spare, so it's all good. So down towards the final sequence of corners, you can bring the car towards the middle of the circuit, which is going to just open up the entry through this I guess flat out kink. Get close to the curb on the right there, just about make contact with it, but make sure that you don't clobber the tyres over the curb, because it will upset the car quite significantly. And then roughly in between the two curbs, you've also got this access road on the right, is pretty much going to be your braking zone for the last corner, which again is another very, very long corner where you're really having to feel the car through. So braking in as straight line as possible, nice and gently, about 50% maximum, getting close to this curb on the entry, which I guess is going to be the first of two apexes. And then towards the end of the braking zone, we're down into second gear now. We're just allowing the car to run out wide, just wider of the middle of the circuit, but try not to let it run any wider than that. Briefly playing with the throttle and brake just to stabilize the car and get the line exactly where I want it to be. As you come over the top of the crest, the circuit goes up slightly and then levels out. That's when you can sort of get back on the throttle, just to set yourself up for the final apex. Hesitation on throttle, just waiting for the car to settle on the perfect line. Line is absolutely critical through here. And then finally, when I'm happy, I'm committing to the throttle. Now I'm not using as much of the throttle as in other corners because I'm still cornering quite heavily. I'm in second gear, so I'm heavily traction limited at this point as well, but I wait for the car to settle and then I commit to full throttle. Now sometimes obviously you want to get as early on the throttle as possible, but sometimes by doing that a bit too early you can induce some oversteer. So we just see on the exit here, there's a correction for oversteer, which we can also see in the steering trace, but it's nothing major. It's pretty much expected through here because the circuit kind of falls away slightly on the exit. And also on the exit, in terms of track positioning, car positioning, I'm taking advantage of the pit lane entry, and sometimes you get a message that's warning you to slow down because it thinks you're actually running into the pit lane. But that's fine. That's just taking full advantage of the width of the circuit. You can find qualifying and race setups, telemetry and replays over at virtualracingschool.com, where you can also book one-on-one tuition with myself and top drivers from the likes of Coanda SimSport. Good luck for this week, and feel free to post any questions or comments below. Thanks for watching.